Well, one of the things you discuss in your Edify video is the damage that no-fault divorce has done. Can you expound on that a little bit more? I mean, because most people say, if two people, they fall out of love and they get divorced, what does it matter to you?
The main reason that every law, every society that we're aware of in history has regulated marriage is to try to encourage people to stay together when they're in the kind of relationship that might make kids, because of the enormous damage for kids who had no say in the matter, and also for society when kids aren't reared by
their mother and father.
Right. No-fault divorce is basically a way of saying, we are no longer trying to put any pressure on you to stay together. You don't even have to give a justification for splitting up. That's effectively what it means. In practice, that's certainly how it's carried out. It's a lot easier to get out of a marriage contract than it is to get out of any other contract. That's really bad because of all the things that we were trying to avoid by regulating marriage in the first place. Right? I mean, and the broken hearts, the broken homes. This isn't a point that's callous to the difficulties of marriage, by the way. There are lots of studies that suggest that couples who have serious difficulties but decide to stay together 5 years later, in the majority of cases, are very happy. So it could be even for the couple's own good. In fact, when I invite people to my wedding, part of what I'm doing is inviting them to put pressure on me to stay together. The reason they're watching me exchange vows with my wife, and why it's not just something we're doing solo, is so that the idea is the community has an interest in this, it's invested in this, and we, as well as the community, have an interest in the community encouraging us to stay together. We do that partly through culture and partly through law, and no-fault divorce is a direct repudiation of that.
Right, it is. And of course, as Catholics, we look at it as in a sacramental way. In the diocese where I live, we always have a golden wedding anniversary mass every year for people who've been married 50 years. And, the media like to show up at that, and they always ask, what's your advice for it? And I just remember one man saying, we had some rough years. And he didn't say we had some rough days, we had some rough moments, we had some rough years. There were years we didn't speak to each other, except on, and you just think, but you get out on the other side of that, and they've been together 50 years. And, when you think about it in contractual language, of course, not just sacramental language, but contractual language, this is the person you're signing up to do this with.
That's the point of a commitment. I mean, if this other person was going to always spontaneously be the person you most want to be with, you don't need a commitment, because you're just going to spontaneously be with them anyway. The whole point of a commitment is to kick in when you would otherwise want to do something else, when you would want to leave. And so the difficulties are not, they're part of the package deal. And if we think commitments are valuable, we think sticking it out through difficulties is valuable, because otherwise there's no reason.
Well, as we wrap up here, we're seeing fewer and fewer young people in their 20s and 30s marrying now. Cohabitation, really significantly soaring. What would you say to college students, graduate students, who are thinking maybe about getting married or putting it off, or et cetera, et cetera? What would you say to them? What advice would you give them about what marriage means, not just to them personally, but also to society?
Yeah, well, as I was saying earlier, I think all of society has an interest in healthy marriages, because you are, God willing, in the ideal case, you are doing something that society absolutely needs and that no one but you can do, which is to care for this completely vulnerable, innocent, precious, and totally helpless new human life, which without your help will do much worse and will be less capable of contributing to others and will require more help from others. And the flip side of that is that you're doing a real contribution to the whole community by being really good parents to these particular individuals.
Because we know that the benefits for children who grow up in intact homes, sociologically and emotionally, and even in terms of how much income they go on to make, that sort of thing, they're all, they score in every metric, they score higher.
Yeah, and my tip on delaying marriage would be, I think a lot of people, sociologists talk about a capstone conception of marriage, where it's the thing you do when you've already fully formed yourself as an individual. You've gotten your graduate degree, you've gotten the job you want to keep for life, and so on. And I think that's a mistake. I think it's best to think of marriage as an adventure that you go through together, which means an adventure, which means something that you don't see all of the details of in advance.
Oh, and thank God that you don't, because
you wouldn't do it. Nobody would get married.
God just reveals things to you and gives you the grace for moments you never thought you could get through.
Right. And those moments are going to be moments that form the kind of person you are with this other person, rather than being fully formed and then figuring out, on balance, are the costs outweighed by the benefits of being together? That's a totally different model.